season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Here we go.
What is up, everybody? Thanks for joining us on episode 62 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. I'm Kyle Sutherland. We're going to be joined by the softball guru, Jared Hawthorn, here in just a second. But before we get started, if you missed our preview episode for baseball and softball, I want to officially welcome you in to the spring edition for baseball and softball coverage. Of course, we do the sports year-round on the Arkansas Preps Weekly podcast, football, basketball, and then on to the spring sports like we're going to be doing now. This is year 4, and I want to first off make sure and tell everybody to subscribe if you have not already. You can do that on YouTube as well as the audio platforms, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you listen. We are there. Now we'll bring in the softball guru himself, Jared Hawthorn. Jared's got the Ouachita Baptist Tigers gear on today. Last time on the preview pod, he had the National Park Nighthawk attire on. And Jared, you got the shirt that I'm very impressed has lasted. I'm not going to age you and tell you how old it is, but I'm extremely impressed that shirt has lasted as long as it has. But I do like that hat as well.
Yeah, the shirt is definitely starting to get a little threadbare. It's getting a little thin. It's somewhere in that 25-year range old. So a little throwback to when I played a short stint of college baseball with OBU. But definitely supporting these OBU Tiger softball, and what a great job that Jeff Jackson's doing down there and building a quality program and doing things the right way and really mentoring young women. And I'm very, very proud of what Coach Jackson's doing down there and the way they've started. They've played a really tough schedule and held their own, and they're getting better all the time. So just want to give them a little shout out and then get ready to cover some high school softball.
Yeah, Coach Jackson has done a great job. You know, he and I have never, we've interacted on social media multiple times. I need to hit him up this year. We've never officially had a conversation, but yes, great job that he's doing there in his first year and doing it with a lot of Arkansas kids, and recruiting even more. We got some more coming too that we'll talk about throughout the season. So before we do get into the conversation, a couple of housekeeping things here. You'll see some new graphics on the screen. Now, the one in the top left corner, AFS, that is Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. We are extremely proud to be partnering again with Jeremy Rice and all of the fine folks at AFS. They do an incredible job. Any natural surface, and you'll see some stuff about them on our social media pages throughout the season, as well as mentioned on this show. Do a phenomenal job. Any natural surface, they can help you out. So call our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas. Also, Chinook Seedery down there in the bottom right corner. We have partnered with the official seed of both USA baseball as well as D1 baseball and softball. So if those brands, if they prefer Chinook, then you should too. Go to ChinookSeedery.com for 10% off your order and put in referral code NSS Media. You'll hear more about that as well. And then also on the bottom left, last but not least, Boom Boom Floor Shine out of Southwest Arkansas. You need any floors cleaned, whether that be in your school, office, whatever the case, call them at 870-833-0521 and talk about so they can tell you what they can do for you and your business. Now we'll get into the reason why you're all here, the softball coverage, and I got one more thing to say before we get into it. Everyone that's followed this show has known me to be, or any of my work in general, they've known me to be very transparent, and that is the case now. This is probably going to be the most rushed episode, or at least seem like the most rushed episode, just because I covered 12 basketball games over the weekend, not complaining whatsoever. I love what I do. But between doing that, finishing up basketball, getting into softball, and being the father of a almost three-year-old, this kept me quite busy. So I'm pretty familiar with what's going on, but we're going to touch on the things that Jared and I had either sent to us or that we saw publicized. That's kind of where we're at right now with it, because Jared's a pretty busy guy too. So really, past this week, everything should get back to normal and we'll get on a normal flow. But okay, now it is time to talk some softball. So Jared, will start in 6A here. And, Bentonville came into the season as our number one team. They're still the number one team. In my opinion, they're by far, I don't know if I'd say by far, but they're the best team in Arkansas overall. We don't ever really do a top 25 or a top 10 overall. This is something that I'm really pondering doing this year. I've talked about it for the past few seasons. Maybe after spring break, that's something that we look at when we get a little bit better view of what these teams are. But coming back from basketball and still all these things, we're trying to really gauge where these teams are, and we'll find that out here over the next few weeks. But Bentonville, they take their annual trip to Louisiana. Coach Early, of course, his dad Alvy coached at UAM for years and got a lot of connections to Louisiana from there, and Kent still uses those and goes and plays some of these Louisiana teams every year. They usually play about 3 or 4, and over the weekend they did really well. They finished 2-1. They lost to now Calvary Baptist put it on them. Calvary Baptist has a pitcher that's going to Georgia. Bentonville lost that game 11-1. That, and according to Coach Early, that's the first time that Bentonville in his 20 years there has ever been run-ruled in school history. So that's a pretty phenomenal feat right there. And then Bentonville did turn around and they smoked West Monroe 10-0, and then beat a Sterlington team that started out the season everybody starts out undefeated. Started them nationally ranked in the top 20. So beat a Sterlington team 14-2. And so I think right now, probably 6A through the first couple of weeks of the season is about what we expected for the most part. Probably the team that's making some noise, though, that maybe many didn't expect is Fayetteville coming in at 6-0. Still a lot to figure out there, but I think that's probably the one team that's made the biggest noise as far as being ranked coming in this year or coming into the first few weeks of the season.
Yeah, I was looking at the game changer on that game with Bentonville and Calvary Baptist, and I was like, wow. I was pretty impressed with what Calvary Baptist was able to do there. Looked like a really strong team, and definitely looking in the box score at what their pitcher did, she was pretty impressive. So I didn't realize that she was committed to Georgia, so that's pretty cool that they got to play somebody on that level and going to see what they had going. I've been very impressed with Fayetteville, like you were saying. I was not expecting, maybe a 5, 6, 7-0 start with them. They're looking much improved, without a doubt. I'd kind of like to see what they do over the next 2 or 3 weeks, especially as they start getting a few conference games mixed in. See if they can hold it up and see if they can keep that progress going.
Yeah, Springdale Harbor is really much to me has proven that they're probably maybe the number 2 team in the state overall, but certainly 6A. Rogers there, Dalen Osborne, as we expected, she's been throwing really well. The Mounties are off to a great start. The biggest question is a lot of this stuff will probably be just because we don't know a whole lot the first few weeks in. A lot of this might be regurgitated from the preview pod, but I think Cabot and Bryant, Conway's also certainly in that mix, but that's the biggest question. Who's going to take over that spot? Who's going to end up taking over the Central? Because I think you feel pretty good about Bentonville right now in the West. Of course, they already beat Harbor once and pretty handily. So of course they'll play them again, but I think that's kind of the biggest question right now. You really like Cabot, you really like Bryant, but also too Conway being in that mix. And then after that, it's just really kind of a toss-up. Central, they are unbeaten at 6-0 coming into this week, but still just haven't really seen, against upper tier competition what they can do. So they've been handling business. So credit to the Lady Tigers on that, but still have some things that need to be seen there. But of course, Cabot this week, when we'll talk about 5A here in a second, they're playing 5A number 1 and defending champion Sheridan, so they'll get a big test there. And then also too, again with Bryant and first year coach Eric Ryan that got promoted after Lisa Dreer stepped away last spring. So I think that's probably the biggest questions that we're going to try to figure out over the next few weeks, or really the remainder of March into April. Who's going to end up stepping up and really taking over that number 1 spot in the Central?
Well, right now, and there's a lot of softball left to play, but what I see right now in the Central, I like Cabot, then Bryant, then Conway, and then Central, pretty much in that order so far from what I'm seeing. I do think those are going to be your hands down your 4 best teams in the Central. Cabot's looking really strong. Other than a couple of bad innings here and there, they've looked strong all year. And Bryant's kind of right there. They've had a handful of bad innings, but no bad games. So it'll be interesting to see. Conway's looking a little stronger than I expected them to be. So I kind of feel like that's going to be your 1, 2, 3, and then Central is definitely looking much improved. So we'll see what they end up, but I think that's going to kind of be the order of that conference for the year so far.
When you and I going down to 5A, when you and I were reviewing the rankings on Sunday, just kind of making the final revisions of them, I think we'll talk about 3A in a second here, but 3A is what we always kind of joke about as being the hardest to rank, the deepest, all those things. Right now, 5A might hold that title. It is really that. I think Sheridan at the time. Now Sheridan has blown the doors off everybody they've played at this point, and then again they'll get a really big test. Now by the time this drops, they will have already played Cabot, but they'll get their biggest test of the season thus far early on. Benton has looked really strong, going 5-1. Of course, BB, the defending state runner-up, is 6-0, looking really good. Then you got a Greene County Tech team that's sitting at 1-1, but they also are getting Sophia Gonzalez back. Of course, the Greene County Tech Eagles had a resilient effort against a dominant Farmington team that had just cream people all year in basketball. And they'll get Sophia Gonzalez and Westland Birdside, two of their top players, back this week. And so that now they'll finally have their full team together. Greenwood at 4-2. Maumelle, they had that loss to, I think it was Whitehall, which Whitehall's in our outside looking in this week, which Whitehall's been known over the last few years to be a little bit of a Jekyll and Hyde team. They've seen them get some really good wins, and then they've had some losses that it's like, how in the world did that happen? But they're off to a pretty good start as well. Searcy is around 500, but they've had some big wins. They beat, I know that Sylvan Hills was one of them. There's one or two more in there that was really impressive. And that was kind of the biggest question. You lose Abby Busby, who was a 3-4 year starter for him there in the circle, and really an underrated arm, Jared, if you ask me. I know you would probably agree with that too. You saw her many times in travel ball and caught up and kept up with her during her time at Searcy. But then you've also got Sylvan Hills in there that could easily probably be, I mean, they're at their best are certainly a top 7, 8, 9 team, and then Bologna in there at 6-2. So that's just the ones there that come off the top of my head, because we knew that particularly the Central Conference was going to be, and I haven't even mentioned any West teams other than Greenwood. Mountain Home is off to a 3-0 start, but still some to figure out there about them. Arkansas High, they lost some pieces there, and they've had a couple of losses to lower classification teams. I know Genoa beat them by a run. They might have played them twice. But there's just still, to me, so much to figure out. I mean, Sheridan right now, through the first couple of weeks, I think they certainly deserve that number 1 ranking, being the defending champions, taking care of business. But I really think probably the team that's going to make the most noise is Benton right now. I really think that now it's hard when you lose a generational talent like Alyssa Houston, like they did coming into last year, but they were extremely young. I think Coach Cox told me they played at one point 15 or 16 combined freshmen and sophomores. So I think that's probably the team this year that's going to make the biggest jump after getting bounced in the first round last season.
Biggest jump. I think Benton's definitely going to be it. There's a lot going on there with Benton. They have excellent young pitching. Rexy Crane and Bella there, Villanueva, and I'm missing another one. There's 3 really salty pitchers there. Then you've got some really good hitters. You got AC Lackey, and you've got just Peyton Stewart, 2 or 3 others that I can't think of right off the top of my head. But watching what they've done this year so far, they're looking really strong, really early, and they've played some really good competition and got some quality wins. So I definitely think in 5A, Benton's going to be the team that is a little better than people expected them to be this year. Of course, Sheridan's always going to be Sheridan. They're loaded with talent. They've got, player after player, and then, Cooper Terry is going to do Cooper Terry things and be dominant in the circle. So they're going to be really impressive, I think. The things that I was going to say, I'm just not real sure on. I think they're going to be really good, but I just don't know how to read them yet because they haven't played much. Greene County Tech, I think, is going to be really solid, but it's hard to tell kind of where they're at so far. And there's a lot of these teams, and we're going to say this 2 or 3 times over different classifications. There's so many teams that have played different classes so far and played up or down during this early part of the season in non-conference, and just been all over the place with not having basketball players back and everything. Man, it's hard to get a really good read on what they're doing right now. I think 1 to 2 more weeks, we're going to have a really good handle on what everybody has this year.
Yeah, I think the look at just I was kind of comparing our preseason rankings for just a couple of weeks ago to the ones that we released this week. And for the most part, it kind of, and you see this a lot where now I think this might have been the most, and I'm not beating our chest by any means, but I think this is probably the closest we've gotten it in terms of the top 3 or 4, maybe since you and I have been doing this together. Now, the back end always is typically the one that's going to be just completely rearranged. And even in that case, it wasn't quite as drastic as I thought it might be. But yeah, I mean, it's 5A, even though it's very tough to gauge right now. It's what we expected in terms of the depth and just all these different teams, because Greenbrier is another one of those that we threw in there that I still think has a chance. Now they're off to a rough start. They played some tough teams, but that's probably about the only one that we haven't mentioned that we were talking about a little bit more in the beginning of the season. But this class, I think that there's probably right now maybe about 10 or maybe a few more in there that we're really going to be watching just to kind of see what happens. Because again, it's just, this is probably the term that you're probably going to hear the most throughout this episode is that it's just so unpredictable right now. And that's a big reason why we don't really start the blowout softball coverage until about this time of the year or around spring break time, is just because that's pretty much where we're at. It's really tough to gauge because it's still puzzle piece season, as I call it. You're still trying to rearrange things. You're getting your pieces in from basketball and trying to figure out where those are going to go. So Sheridan, meant to mention, then they won the Taylor Roark tournament, and we saw the Starrett sisters absolutely go off. Jared, I think so. So Sadie, who's a freshman, obviously everybody knows who Skylar is at this point, the Arkansas commit. They had a combined effort of, I think it was around, and I don't want to say this wrong, but I want to say that combined they were around like over 600-700 batting average, and just crazy numbers that they put up at that Taylor Roark tournament Sheridan. We were talking about Benton a second ago, and I was thinking about Bryant, that Sheridan won. Third time's the charm. So, again, I think that matchup, and I know that the Cabot game will have already been played by the time that this goes through, but this time publishes. But those two are really going to be a force to be reckoned with. I know you lose Mary Lim there at third base, but you've already got Skylar there in the middle infield. That's incredible. And then you add her sister, who's been playing up basically her whole entire life.
Yeah, the Starrett sisters are going to be something that you hear us talk about a lot this year. Both of those young ladies are amazing athletes. I've heard different people say that they think the little sister's the better athlete of the two, and I have a hard time imagining that. And I'm like, holy cow, how is that even possible when you look at how athletic and how good that Skylar is, to turn around and say that Sadie's possibly the better athlete of the two? It's like, man, I don't know if I want to see a team that has both of those on the same team. Yeah. It's going to be pretty hard to play against. They definitely put up some crazy numbers during that stretch, especially over the tournament. And I think they were nominees for our Players of the Week, and probably are going to be nominees for our Player of the Week almost weekly, either one of them or both of them. Just incredible athletes. You mentioned a while ago on the 5A section, Arkansas High, and I really am kind of waiting to see what Arkansas High has this year. I've heard they're down a little bit. They've won a couple of decent games that makes them look pretty good. They've lost a couple. I think they're going to stay in that conversation in the top 4 in the conference, but I don't know if they're going to be quite as strong as last year. Macy Lee individually for Arkansas High has put up insane numbers so far this year. She's batting like 730, I want to say, for the season. Tons of RBIs, pitching the ball really well and shutting teams down. So that kid has just continued to just be dominant for her team. Anaya Arnold is an amazing athlete. She's real close behind Skylar Starrett when it comes to speed and ability to cover ground, and she's going to be another player down there that's going to put up crazy numbers this year for Arkansas High. So we'll see where they go with within their conference and see if they can make some noise. I know they lost a lot, and then I heard just a couple of days ago that they had another player get hurt. That's one of their starters, so it may make a difference in what they're able to do this season. But if they can stay healthy and keep rolling, they may be in that mix.
It's funny you bring up Anaya's speed, because you think about her and Skylar Starrett in that same conference, and then Sadie's got some nice speed on her as well. And then Benton, who is now, of course, in the Central, but the South last year, you had in the same conference last year, you had Cam Cole-Klager, Anaya Arnold, and Skylar Sterrett. I mean, arguably, definitely three of the fastest girls in Arkansas, possibly the fastest three. And then now, of course, Benton is in the gauntlet that is the Central. But it's insane to think that those three, with all that elite track speed, were playing in the same conference, but same class, but let alone the same conference. So then down to 4A. This is a really tough one right now too, Jared, because you look at some of the win-loss records. Gentry at 2-3 is definitely a mirage. You look, they're playing up. Now that they're no longer a secret and they know what they have. I know Coach Teeters was definitely going to make sure they challenge themselves in non-conference play, even though their conference maybe not. I doubt their conference is going to be as strong as since Farmington moved out, which. Actually, before we get into 4A heavily, I do need to mention the Farmington Cardinals have only played 2 games, but they're looking really good, Jared. They played a Lincoln team, that we had ranked number. They're Lincoln and DeWitt flip-flopped this week. I guess I can say that now since this will drop around the same time the rankings do. But after the rankings. But I've been really impressed with Farmington. I don't know how much you've looked, but they've got some freshmen and sophomores. Morgan Ure has been playing basketball. So I think I talked to somebody from Farmington at the basketball state championship over the weekend. They've got 2 girls, Morgan Reeves and Mallory Seals, that played multiple varsity innings, really meaningful varsity innings last year. So Farmington, I think, is another one to really keep an eye on in 5A.
I'll definitely agree with you on the Farmington on 5A side. And we didn't mention them much because they're just getting back from basketball after winning, 3 straight state championships. But they definitely, I think Farmington is going to be right there in that mix of teams to beat in 5A. I think they're going to be a top 3 5A team for the year. I just haven't got to see much out of them yet because of them just getting back from basketball. Love Morgan Ewer. She's a great kid, great athlete, just absolutely one of those kids that changes the game for a team. So I can't wait to see them get going and see a little bit out of them, and we'll definitely be talking about them a lot during the rest of the season.
Yeah, stay patient with us, because it was all in good fun, but I did hear from about 2, hey, you better, we want to see us in the rankings soon. I'm like, just be patient. You'll get there. I have a strong feel. I even said on the preview pod that Jason Shirey, I don't care what the situation is, you lose your entire team or you bring everybody back. He's a proven coach for a quarter of a century now, essentially, dating back to when he was an assistant at Arkansas and the job that he and Carrie Deaver-Boaz really did starting that program. And, of course, his work at Fayetteville speaks for itself. Oh, and he's also a state champion at Farmington, defending one. So we get it. We would just be patient with us. This is a really deep class. So we have a very strong, Jared just said it, and I tend to agree with him. I don't know that I'm ready to say top 3 yet, but I feel pretty confident in saying top 5, or you will be ranked at some point. I think that team is going to get real hot early, especially kind of like what we saw last year. But down in 4A, it's really tough to gauge right now. All of them are, but probably the team, Jared, the 2 teams that have made the biggest noise for me is Lone Oak. Lone Oak is, and you nailed it. I know you talked about that on the preview pod, that you expect them to be very well improved, and they have played really well against the tough competition. Yeah, their record 6-4, so it's maybe not be a world beater, but look at who they played. They've had some good wins. They've had some understandable losses. I hate that term, but I still say it. But they've had some losses that it's kind of like, okay, if they're playing against some tough competition, you got to respect that. One that's intrigued me is Prairie Grove. I got a chance to see Prairie Grove last year in the Farmington tournament. And Jared, I'm just going to tell it like it is. They were probably the least talented team there when you talk about Harbor, Farmington, and we're talking about last year, Gravette, Lincoln, Bentonville West, Hackett. I just named off a who's who there. I named off 2 state champions, a state runner-up. A lot of 2 state runner-ups in that mix. So that and they challenged themselves and played in that mix. And look, they got beat pretty bad. But the fact is you know how I feel about it. I don't care what the situation is. If you're playing competition that's going to make you better, I respect it. And they brought in they're really excited about their freshman class. But coming into this week, they're 7-4 and still have plenty to prove. And maybe that I talked about a second ago, how the 4A1 conference last year, hands down, was, and we saw this in there was 3 teams from the 4A1 in the semifinal round. And then, of course, Farmington and Pea Ridge played each other in the state championship round. Gravitt definitely took some hits with some of the losses that they had. Some of the seniors that they graduated, Laney Chilton, not playing softball and focusing on volleyball. And I still think Gravitt is going to be competitive, but can Prairie Grove be that next team along with Pea Ridge and Gentry that can step up? And I think they can if they continue to just improve the way that they have. And so I think that that's a team to watch this year, but that's probably been the 2 teams that have really made the most noise to me that we maybe didn't expect to talk about quite as much at this point is Lone Oak and Prairie Grove. I think we had a freeze.
I don't know if I lost Wi-Fi or something. We lost connection somewhere.
Yeah, I don't know how much but basically what I was just kind of going on a rant, just talking about the 4A1 last year. And I think that Prairie Grove, if they continue to improve, continuing to play well like they have, they could maybe catch up into that mix. Maybe not catch up to Gentry and Pea Ridge, but be that 3rd or 4th team in there. Because I still think Gravitt is going to be competitive, but I really like what we've seen from Pea Ridge. And then, of course, Lone Oak. I think Pea Ridge and Lone Oak are the teams that have really made the most noise that we didn't talk about quite as much in the preseason.
Yeah, I agree completely. I don't know if we got connection back or where we're at. But anyway, definitely I think Prairie Grove's becoming that 3rd or 4th place team there in that conference. I think they've really improved. I haven't gotten to know Prairie Grove nearly as well as I should because they were never really the team in the conversation in the conference. But now I got to start doing some research and getting to know those kids on that team because it looks like they're going to be in the conversation for a while now.
No doubt. And I think that's kind of where we're at with it too, with Farmington moving out. I still expect, I know I just mentioned about how Gravitt, they took some big hits, but Coach Luther is a great coach. She played under Randy Osnes at Farmington, was an all-state. I think multi-time all-state player, actually, if I'm not mistaken. And she's a great developer. She knows how to develop her kids. She's a big reason why they have gotten to yes, they've had some very talented players over the past few years. They won that 2023 state championship. So maybe not putting them in the state title contender right now, talking about the Lions, of course, but I still think Gravitt's going to be in that upper tier of the 4A1, and Prairie Grove is certainly going to challenge for it as well. Then down to 3A, the infamous 3A. To me, Jared, it's really not as hard as I thought it would. It's not easy by any means to figure out, but I do think you and I were talking about it, and we flip-flopped DeWitt and Lincoln. I do think DeWitt probably, as far as just complete teams right now. Now, Brinkley Morton is the best player, and I know that she's gotten kind of roughed up in some games here. It's early. I don't think anything about that, but to me, Brinkley Morton is still the top player in 3A, but as far as the top overall complete team, DeWitt is that to me. I think when Mayflower gets it there, Mayflower's played probably the toughest schedule. I would say Mayflower has played the toughest schedule. They played 8 games coming into this week, and they played Harbor. I'm actually going to pull up their schedule here in a second because I definitely need to point this out because I was looking at it when I got back home from Hot Springs. I was looking at some of the scores, and I was like, okay, I think Jeff Hill might have a side of insanity and is running through his blood. I'm just kidding, Coach. I'm just messing with you. But credit to the Lady Eagles, because that is yes, that's a gauntlet of a schedule. I know Harbor, again, was one. I think Cabot was also one of the others. As I'm talking here and killing time, I'm going to pull it up. But I would definitely say, and that's a big reason why Mayflower is sitting at 3-5 right now, is because they played those teams. And so that's, again, why I say focus on the strength of schedule and not the record because of that. So in these losses, you've got Bologna, 5A ranked, Conway, 6A ranked, Cabot, 6A ranked, Harbor, 6A ranked, and then Benton, 5A ranked, and all those pretty highly as well. So if that's not a gauntlet, Jared, I don't know what is. I mean, that is by far the first 2 weeks of the season, the toughest schedule. So I think that Mayflower could also fit into that category as maybe being the most complete team. We'll see once they start playing a little bit more on their level of competition, but those are the type of games that get you ready for May. Harding Academy, like what they've seen, they've taken some lumps against really tough competition. Genoa Central is off to a kind of a surprising maybe 8-1 start, maybe surprising by our regards, not so much in Southwest Arkansas. Bentonville hanging in there at that 7th spot this week. And then also, look at Atkins as one of those that we're still trying to figure out what they're going to do after losing multiple key starters in that 2024 class. I think they had 4 that came back. But Lamar, they're 2-3 coming into this week, Jared. But I've heard, you've heard it, I've heard it. I've heard from multiple coaches that there are 2 coaches in particular that played them. When everything comes together for Lamar, that it could be very special for them. Of course, they just got Corey Sanders. I was actually talking to Coach Barton on Sunday night, and I was confirming the record and everything. And that's what he had said. They got some basketball girls back. These girls won a state championship in 3A. They were there for the 3rd time in 4 years. They won that on Friday night or Thursday night, I guess it was. Whenever that was. It was sometime, I can't even remember at this point, but they won us a 3A state championship. The very next day, they played a softball game. Corey Sanders, their shortstop, she had I would say Corey, she definitely shot from 3-point range the best out of anybody in the state championship, boys or girls, that week, but definitely one of the better performances overall, and then turns around and plays a softball game the next day. So this is one of those teams that once they get all their basketball girls to gel and everything comes together, Lamar is going to be, we got them checked in at number 5 this week at 2-3, but I think that they're going to be one that can climb the ranks really, really quick.
Yeah. Lamar is definitely going to be one of the toughest teams in the state this year. And they're just coming out of basketball, got that state championship, but they went literally the next day right into a tournament in softball and playing, 3 or 4 games right off the bat. They look really strong early. For them to be that good right straight out of basketball, I think they've had 1 or 2 team practices together with the basketball girls there, so you got a lot of good little ball players on that group. You got, Addie Harden, you got Harley Wicker, Corey Sanders, Macy Hilton and Natalie Simmons, Shaylee Mayfield and Shaylee Palmer. Miley Parker's doing a good job in the circle. And they've got a little left fielder, Newt Melton, that I've noticed has put up some really good little numbers early. That I don't know her, but just looking at the box scores, looks like pretty impressive. So they've just continued to be very impressive. They kind of left off last year. Looking at them, I was like, man, they're right there on the verge of that team that's going to break through and really dominate people. And I think they took that confidence and they came into it firing on all cylinders early on. I think you're going to see them really hammer some people over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And I think climb those rankings up there to maybe the 2 or 3 spot in 3A.
Yeah. You look at this Lamar, just a little bit of history on this 2025 class, and Eric Taylor from the Democrat Gazette and I talked about it on the live show on Sunday night. This 2025 class has a lot of motivation. You think about basketball, they lost to Bergman as 9th graders. Shaylee Mayfield was in that group as well. And I don't think Emma Bailey plays softball, but she was huge in the state championship the other night and has been for the Lady Warriors for a while now. But they lost to state their freshman year in basketball. Came back their sophomore year. Now, Corey wasn't playing. Corey Sanders, she had hurt her knee, and so she didn't play in the state championship in 2023. They lost to Salem. Basketball, they lose their junior year to Salem in the quarterfinal round, and then, of course, won a state championship the other night. Then you flip it over to softball, and 2023 was when, I was getting emails, and I think you were getting DMs too, like, hey, this Lamar team, you really need to pay attention to. I think they ended up being ranked around the state tournament time or regional, something like that, right before we started those tournaments. And Jared, they had a runner. If I remember it correctly, they had a runner on third base ready to tie the game against Atkins in the state semifinal round, and it didn't work out for them. And then Atkins ended up going to another state. I guess that was Atkins' second straight to go to. So you have that, and then you mentioned last year they got bounced in the regional round, but they played in the toughest. They were in the 3A5 conference last year. Now they're in the 3A4, but the 3A5 was there with Baptist Prep, with Atkins, with Mayflower. It was the toughest for sure, and so they were in that conference. And then when you pair regional with 3A6, you got Harding Academy and all those cats in there. No pun intended, with talking cats, but. Then you play Harding Academy, and I think they lost that game by a run in the regional. So I say all that to say these girls, both from basketball, they used that motivation and they took care of business and won a state championship in basketball. And then some of those that went through that have also experienced that in softball. So I think this Lamar team, and I'm not predicting they're going to win a state championship or anything, but just kind of goes to show that these are a really talented kids on a really talented team that have plenty of motivation, especially after not going to the state tournament last year.
Parents, coaches, a whole lot of people that are big supporters of this Lamar program, and I'll have to say it's justified excitement because they're gonna have a really good group. I'm gonna tell you, Addie Harden from the defensive side might be one of the most underrated catchers in the state of Arkansas. She has a really good ability to frame the pitch, and she has a rocket arm. So defensively, she's going to be something special for them. Going back over to Mayflower, when you were talking about their strength of schedule, just blows my mind the amount of quality teams they scheduled early this year, and they definitely want to prove a point that they can play with anybody, and that they definitely want to prepare to go win a state championship if they can make it happen. Really impressed with that. I do think that Coach Hill might have lost his mind when it comes to how many of them he scheduled so close together, and I bet when they kind of get back in conference, those girls are like, "Whoo, we can breathe again."
Yeah.
But definitely, they're definitely one of the best team, if not the best team in 3A this year. There's about 4 teams in that mix that are going to be really strong, really good in 3A, and then there's about 4 to 6 more behind them that are all going to be right there knocking on that door. So it'll be interesting to see what we have come out of 3A.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to give a little bit more love to the DeWitt not Lady Dragons, Dragonettes. I apologize for that. I do want to give some love to them because, last year they were on the verge. I think they kind of stayed within the outside looking in all season and then moved up to the top, maybe 6-7 range. I can't remember exactly how it was last year, but they have earned that number 1 spot. I'll go ahead and admit it. I had them still at number 2, and Jared was the one that kind of was the voice of reason on that. It was like, hey, we need to probably bump them up. I mean, they've really played well. The only team they've lost to was a really good West Washita team in Louisiana. They played, I think, it was Beekman and West Washita, I believe it was, but they've shut out Star City. They beat they didn't play the Monticello game, but they beat Whitehall. They beat Malvern. Pretty much all their wins have been, and CrossFit, I know is CrossFit started off well, but hasn't played exceptional competition. But they've got another win over a 4A team. So they've played up. DeWitt has, and I expect them to. So we talked about Harley Grammer. We talked about, of course, AC Cox, who's been their starter in the middle infield there for since her freshman year. Belle Easterwood, I know, is another one of those. It's Belle Easterwood, right? It's her.
Yeah, I believe it's Belle.
Yeah, Easterwood, I know is her last name. That used to be at Dumas, so has been one that's made noise. So yeah, I mean that DeWitt team, they've done a great. Of course, they've got a new coach this year that man. I mean, it's essentially one of those things, Coach Maggard, that you just basically don't. It's one of those things you're giving the keys to a Ferrari, and you just kind of let the kids play and do their thing. So big shout out to the DeWitt Dragons. They have earned this number 1 spot up to this point.
Yeah, DeWitt's definitely going to be the team that I'm looking at pretty much all season this season to see. I know they're, if not the most talented, one of the most talented teams in the state, and they're kind of a gritty team. I think if you remember, I said that a few times last year about them. Like, they're a good team. They're really gritty. They don't give up. If they get down by a few runs, they don't quit. They keep fighting and scratching and finding a way. Well, they kind of carried that over into proving to everybody, hey, we're not just a good team that fights hard. We're a really good team, and we're going to be here to play. And they've scheduled some quality competition already this year and proven that they can hang with some of the best around. I think they've gained that little bit of in-game experience, especially when they went through the playoffs last year, and made a run through the tournaments. That they needed to kind of push them up that rank from just being a good team to a really great team. And I think this year they're going to be a really great team. We'll be talking about DeWitt a ton, and some of those girls that you just mentioned, Harley Grammer and Easterwood, and some of them, you'll hear their names over and over and over this year because they continue to just do big things on the field. AC Cox. Those are all just tremendously talented young ladies, and I'm excited to see what they do this year.
Then in 2A, it's still Hackett. They're 9-0 right now. They've taken care of business. And Hackett's going to have some big tests. We're going to find out. I mean, and Jared, you and I have talked about this just in conversation. They're definitely one of the top overall teams, regardless of classification. But we're going to find out what they're about this week, just because they're going to play. Not that they haven't played anybody tough already, but they're going to get bent. They're playing in that Farmington tournament. I know they've got Benton, and I think Bentonville West. They played Bentonville West last year. That was an interesting game. That was the nightcap of the first night of the Farmington tournament. Some interesting stuff went down at the end there, and I think West won 5-3. But that was actually the first time I had ever seen Hackett in person, seen Mackenzie and Mikey Freeman and all them, and of course Lily Oxford, Morgan Coryell. I mean, these girls that we've covered for what seems like ages now. But I think that this weekend they're going to get a really big test and really figure out where they're at, because they got a lot coming back from last year. So I think they knew, not just from last year, but really for the past 3 or 4 years, but they're going to be tested. But yeah, right now, I mean, they pretty much are. Hackett is kind of seems like not the runaway, but definitely the favorite in 2A right now, because Quitman, they played really well. I want to elaborate on them and Des Arc here in just a second, but Riverside, coming in at 2-2, they literally just about every girl that contributes on this softball team contributed in basketball that went to the state tournament. So that's another one of those that they just got their basketball girls over. Might take a little bit to get acclimated. Not really worried about that 2-2 record for them right now. Woodlawn has been an interesting case. I think Woodlawn's played more games than anybody in the state. They come into this week at 10-4, had some good wins, but had their lumps as well. But you certainly have to respect what they've played. Tuckerman is 6-1. The only loss that they have was to Des Arc. So Tuckerman looking really good after dropping back down to 2A, because they won the 2A state championship 2 years in a row in 21 and 22, and have looked really good this year. They were in 3A the past 2 years and then came back down. But we mentioned a lot about Carlisle. Carlisle checks in at number 7 this week. Talked about them in the preseason and how they really loaded their schedule last year. They're at 5-5 right now, but I've been very impressed with them, with Jared, with how they competed, especially not just competed against a tough schedule, but they played multiple. I can't remember what it was Coach Golden told me, but they played a lot of games in a short time. And I actually had 2 coaches, and I hope she sees this. And if she doesn't see it, she's probably been told it, because I mentioned it to Jason, Coach Golden. But Jessa Wiles, I was told by 2 coaches, basically in so many words, she's probably the most underrated player in 2A. She might be one of the most underrated, or maybe the most underrated in the state overall. And we've sung her praises for the last few years. Coach Golden had told me that she was almost like a coach on the field. She's been on the team since she was a manager in 8th grade. So that, I know that's a really, really high praise, but it doesn't shock me that was said. She's got a lot of speed. She's a great middle infielder. She's got a really good stick. So that it wasn't super surprising for me to hear. I haven't seen Jessa in person since her sophomore year, and I was really impressed even then when she was a youngster. So I think this Carlisle team really is. And look, we knew last year that they were good. We just weren't able to gauge it because of the schedule, or really just they were playing teams that weren't as good as them. And so now that we're really getting to see them, I'm not worried about wins right now so much as we are about competing. So I know I kind of said a lot there. I do want to talk about the Heber Springs Invitational that Des Arc and Quitman won, and I'll let you kind of feed off of what I just mentioned there. But those top teams, kind of just a revision of what I was saying. Hackett, obviously 9-0 right now. They're proving their worth. Riverside at 2-2. Still some things to figure out now that all the basketball girls are there. Woodlawn has played a lot of good games. Tuckerman sitting at 6-1 with their only loss to Des Arc, and then Carlisle coming in at 5-5 against a brutal schedule.
Yeah, just kind of a quick touch on all of those. Hackett, they're an amazing team, no doubt about it. Probably top 3 team in the state overall, top 3 to 4 team in the state overall. Really impressive. Mackenzie Freeman is one of those young ladies that she throws really well. She's a top 5 or 10 pitcher in the state without a doubt. And then she's got an amazing defense and a lot of bats behind her too. So when you pair a really good, talented pitcher like that with a lot of quality defense and hitting, it makes for a really good team. and they've done well year after year after year, and I expect them to really just kind of blister through a lot of 2A this year. There's only a handful of teams, in my opinion, in 2A that have a chance to knock them off. I really like Riverside. I like Woodlawn with their pitching staff. Woodlawn maybe has the deepest pitching staff in the state of Arkansas. You got Lily Faye McWhirter, you got Chastain girl, you got the Rawls girl. All three of those can throw the ball really well. And when Lily Faye's on, she's just about untouchable when she's at her best. You've got a pretty decent. I had originally heard with Woodlawn that they might not have the team to go with the pitching staff, but I'm starting to see that maybe they do have the team to go with the pitching staff because they're beating some quality teams, and they're playing good ball behind their pitchers right now. I would continue to be really impressed, and maybe the most impressed with any single player this year with Kaylee McDonald. Kaylee McDonald absolutely just lit it up from inside the circle this year. I don't think she has a game with less than 13 strikeouts. They've played quality competition, and she's just been amazing. So that Desart team is going to be right in the mix. And then when you get back over to Carlisle, without a doubt, they've been there. They've been really good for 2 or 3 years. This year they're playing a really strong strength of schedule early. It's going to make them a lot better, and they've competed or beaten several of those good teams. Even the games they've lost, they've been within just a run or two of really good quality teams. So that competing early, like you've talked about, that's going to make them so much better in the stretch when they start running, towards district tournament and regionals and state. Very impressed with several girls on there, especially Jessa Wiles. She can absolutely go. I got to see just a few minutes of her last weekend at the tournament in Hot Springs, and that leadership part is without a doubt. I watched her on the field, in the dugout. She's just always positive, always building up teammates. She's definitely, that's a really good assessment as a coach on the field. And they've got, several good ball players on that team. Of course, Matt Cook's a good little catcher for them, and they're gonna be impressive this year. I'm excited to kind of see what they do this year after the good quality start against quality competition.
And also, too, I wanted to talk about going a little bit more in depth on Desark and Quitman because there was 2 brackets. And now, is my understanding, I think the Heber Springs Invitational had about 24 teams in it. I think that there was initially other brackets and maybe some teams dropped. I don't know the exact story, but what I do know is Quitman won their bracket, Desark won theirs. So you look at some of the teams, and I'm not just talking about from last weekend, but Quitman, I mean, they lost their opening game to Bologna 16-0. I'm not really going to scoff at losing to a ranked 5A team. Then you beat Whitehall. You beat Carlisle. They've also beaten Wonderview, which, you expect that. Beat a really good 4A Lone Oak team that's ranked right now, a really good Brooklyn team that's ranked, and also Harding Academy beat them 2-1. So Quitman is off to a whale of a start. And I've said this before, Coach Davis and also too, Marty Rhodes, the guy that knows what he's doing in softball, also is an assistant on that team. So that they have a great coaching staff, and Quitman is good every year, but sometimes a little bit Jekyll and Hyde at certain seasons. I don't think Coach Davis would mind me telling this, but I think it was either last year or the year before. We were texting a little bit about this time, and I just kept, and this is very common for coaches to say this time of year, but she's like, this position, I'm just not sure. This position, I'm just not sure. But when I got some of the information back from her this year from one of those preview sheets, thank you for filling that out, by the way, Coach Davis. I felt like that they maybe had, even though they lost All-State pitcher Chloe Lyles, there's the girl that's been pitching for him now. I'm sorry, her name's slipping my mind, but she's been doing really well. That's one that I got to make sure I get down because I've been so used to Chloe over the last few years. I think it's Emma Finley, if I'm not mistaken, because I want to say it starts with an E. But been pitching really well, and that's look, you're taking over for Chloe. That's I think a 2-time All-State pitcher from, but nonetheless somebody that threw a lot of innings for them. So Quitman definitely living up to the billing. They are one of 2A's top teams, and as you said, Kaylee McDonald just been. I mean, she is she's been striking people out since in droves since her freshman year. But you also look at Desart's schedule. They lost by a run to Harding Academy. What a whale of a game between. I think Kaylee had 16 strikeouts and Ace Ellis had 17. My kind of game. Everybody knows how much I love a pitcher's duel. And then, of course, they beat Carlisle. They beat Tuckerman. So that's one thing that I talked to Coach McDonald, Kaylee's dad, that's their assistant. Chris and I talk a good bit, and that's what he said is the good teams stay in 1-run games. The great teams win 1-run games. So that's kind of been their MO right now, is really trying to be able to win those close games when they're in them. And when you got an arm like Kaylee McDonald, you got a good chance of doing it.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about the Quitman side, I've been very impressed with Quitman. In fact, I was actually sitting here trying to look up some of theirs because I can't remember their pitcher's name either, but I remember seeing in the box scores just throwing the ball well. I would say that Quitman has a real shot to be in that top 3 or so conversation in 2A all year long. For sure, they're going to stay probably in the rankings all year long in 2A. Very impressive team. Coach Rhodes always does a good job. Always has them prepared. They're always fundamentally sound. Always solid on defense. Always hit the ball pretty well. And if they can find the pitching to go with that, they're going to be a pretty special team in 2A this year. They've always hung around the last 2 to 3 years, just kind of on the verge of that top 5 to 7 teams, and been just out of it. And a lot of that was they were solid, but they didn't quite have the pitching, to finish to make a run all the way to the state championship. But they've been right there, like right on that verge. And I think this year they're looking just a little bit stronger than they have in the past, and I think they're going to be in that conversation, probably in the top 3 to 5 conversation in 2A all year long. And what they do all year long with their pitching, if it develops, they may be having a chance to make a run to the state championship.
It is Emma Finley. I wanted to make sure. I'm glad that I when I said her name, I was like, I'm guessing, but I think that's right. And I did just confirm. I looked at their Facebook page. Also, thank you to Quitman's really good about keeping their Facebook pages updated. I commend anybody who does, because that's how, yes, Jared and I talk to a lot of coaches, but look, we're 2 guys that have a lot on our plate, so we can't touch base with every coach every single week. So please put your stuff on Twitter. Tag me, tag Jared. Also, of course, my Twitter handle my X handle is down there. And also those that put your stuff on Facebook. It's incredible. We do follow Game Changers very heavily as well, but it's extremely helpful when your stuff's on social media. So appreciate Quitman for that. But heading down to 1A, last but not least. So Jared, we talked about during the preview show that there was probably going to be a little over the past 2 seasons. So the first year we did this in 2022, it was essentially, what were we going to say about Taylor this week? Last year, and then 2023, Bradley kind of moved into that mix. And if we weren't talking about Taylor or Bradley, we were talking about the 1A2, Shirley, Viola, Westside, Greers Ferry, Calico Rock, Concord, just kind of whoever was hot that particular week. This year, like this, and this is definitely kind of regurgitated from the preview show, Taylor's there until somebody else proves otherwise. Scranton's 3-0 right now, but they're going to play some tougher competition down the line. Haven't really been challenged yet. And then you've got a Westside Greers Ferry team that just dominated through 1A basketball, and now they're going to play their first game because they haven't. Their whole team's been playing basketball basically. So as of we're recording on this Monday, they play, I believe, Concord this evening. So by the time that this drops, they will have played. But as of right now, Westside hasn't played. Then you look at Bradley, that's 5-1. Concord, despite losing some of their best players, they're sitting at 5-2. Calico Rock, which we expected to be pretty decent this year, sitting at 3-1, and then Viola's 4-0. Still, Viola, kind of like Scranton, they'll be challenged a little bit more down the line here. They basically, I think Viola's won all their games pretty handily, if I'm not mistaken. But realistically, right now, Jared, you look at Bradley, regardless of the order that you put them in, Taylor, Bradley, or Taylor, Scranton, and Westside are the ones that just about everybody's looking at, I think, right now, and rightfully so. So Taylor, they're sitting at 2-2. I think their losses are to, I think it's Malvern. It's higher classification schools. I think it's Malvern and Nashville maybe, but that's, they always play those tough competition or those higher classifications during this time of year once they get done. Of course, Taylor also, you think about that they went to the state tournament and made it to, I think, the either quarterfinals or semifinals. So they're just now getting a lot of basketball girls back. But really right now, it's going to be Taylor, Scranton, and Westside in that mix, really, until somebody proves otherwise.
Completely agree with you. Taylor, Westside, and Scranton, to me, stand out head and shoulders above the rest of 1A competition right now. Now, there's going to be a couple teams that I think are going to get in that conversation as they improve throughout the year. Scranton is a team that I'm really impressed with them. Delaney Maynor is pitching Albermine. I saw her in the fall because she pitched for our travel team, and she put up insane numbers against 18 open travel against some of the best, hitters in the state and several states around. And she put up like a below 1 ERA and had, almost 2 strikeouts an inning kind of deal. She was very impressive in fall ball. So far, she's been, very impressive coming out of basketball, especially. Been very impressive in softball. And I think her numbers are just going to get better the more she throws through the year because she's knocking that rust off. They've got several good hitters. I've noticed in their box scores, Katie, I think it's Vonderheid. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Marissa Lays, Natalie Miller, Mackenzie Croft, Morgan Lansing. There's just a whole stretch of kids that are hitting the ball well. They're playing good defense. Delaney's throwing the ball really well. And I haven't even seen Delaney's little sister Brecken throw yet, and I know she's a crazy talent in the circle too. She's a really good hitter and a good infielder also. So I haven't seen her throw any innings yet. So they've got depth. So when they get into a stretch where they've got to have it, they've got depth in the circle. Just going to be a really good little team that has a real shot at playing for a state championship again this year. Taylor's going to be Taylor. You got Ayla Buford that's just one of the most historic talents in the state of Arkansas over a 3 or 4 year stretch. That's done insane things and won 3 straight state titles, been a state championship MVP 3 times and could very well be a 4th. Just a quality program. They just turn out winners down there. And I think they're going to be right in that conversation again. I think the really big question mark this year and the team that everybody's kind of setting back is Westside, and Westside is going to be insanely talented. And we haven't got to see them yet because they've been, go over in basketball and winning a state championship over there. A lot of those same girls will be coming over to the softball side and doing their best to win a state championship in softball. Very similar to like what Farmington has done up in 5A. They're winning state championships and then going to softball field and trying to win state championships. So definitely Westside is going to be in that conversation. We'll have a lot more to say about them over the next few weeks as they get started playing and we get to see who's doing what for them. After that, it gets kind of murky waters. Bradley's going to be pretty decent. I think they're going to be right up there pretty good. And then after that, it starts getting harder to tell who's going to do what. I think Concord and Viola and, some of those others are going to have a chance to do really well. I just don't know if they are in the same realm as far as competing for the state championship. Quality teams, quality kids there, but definitely it's going to be hard to bypass those 3 teams at the top. And we'll see how it shakes out over the next couple of weeks because we'll get to see a lot of 1A getting to play 1A again here soon, and we'll find out who's going to separate themselves.
Yeah, plenty to figure out. You've heard us say that multiple times here, and Kevin and I will say it on baseball. And of course, next week or this week, we've got some games, and then spring break happens. Actually, during spring break, I will be headed over to Jared. I think you and I have talked about this. So Des Arc is going to play Hernando, Mississippi. Hernando is coached by, I can't remember her name, but she's from Boonville. And Macy Deaver Boaz, who was on this show a couple of weeks, or I guess a little over a month ago, with her mom, Carrie Deaver Boaz, the first ever Razorback softball coach. Macy is their catcher, and her and Kaylee McDonald played together in travel ball. I think it was for Iowa Premier, if I'm not mistaken. So Hernando is going to come over here on Christmas. I need some rest. Going to come over here on spring break, and I'm actually going to go cover that game. So that should be really interesting. Really excited during spring break. Of course, we've got teams that are going back. I know that Carlisle is going to go. Coach Golden was telling me they're not going to play in that same Alabama tournament that they played in last year, but they're going to go play some other Alabama teams, and they're apparently going to go. He's got a relationship with Coach Patrick Murphy at Alabama, and they're going to go get a chance to, I think, go kind of tour some facilities and do some other things there. So that's going to be a really great experience for those girls. And I know GCT is going to the GCT goals. Greene County Tech goes to the Gulf Shores tournament just about every year. And then on the baseball side, of course, Natural State Sports will be streaming the Robinson tournament that's going to have about 75 teams. And we'll be streaming that here exclusively on the Natural State Sports Network. I actually did a podcast episode for that with Kevin. And so I think Coach Delaney from Robinson as well. So a lot of exciting stuff. And I'll leave you guys with this. If for those that are still, we're almost an hour in here. As I talked about at the top of the show, you see some fresh graphics on here. AFS is a familiar one for those that watched last year, but we're still in the market for sponsorships. And I mean, we're always, the more we have, the more that we can do for these kids. We're not asking for more sponsorships so Jared and I can build a mansion on the lake. We are asking for sponsorships or partnerships, as I like to refer to them to, so we can give these kids the coverage they deserve and more exposure that they deserve. But we also have to have some help with it. You know, we're dads. We got to make a living too, and we've got to raise a family too. So we've got to find ways to make sure and also make it worth our time. Jared and I have done a lot of work for free, happily. But, you know, we've got to do things that make sense at this time too. And so we appreciate Boom Boom Floor Shine for stepping up, Chinook Seedery, as well as our friends at Athletic Field Service of Arkansas coming back for a second season as well. But Jared, I know you got to get out of here and go get ready for a softball game here in a bit, but that'll close it out for us unless you got anything else to say for this episode.
Talking about just continue to just, you know, kill it on the field. I've been just watching a lot of these individual players, and I can't say enough how impressed I've been so far with what Kaylee McDonald has done. She just looked really dominant in the circle against quality competition. You know, I'm excited about our little team here at Cutter. We're gonna try to see if we can find a way to compete. And Jaylee's throwing the ball well. You know, and gotten 45 strikeouts in 3 games. So we're hoping we can keep that up and rolling and her stay healthy. But individually, I've seen several girls just really be impressive. Kaylee McDonald leads that list for sure. And we want everyone to continue to nominate quality players that have big performances for our players of the week. Because, you know, week 1, we got several nominations. Week 2, we got a few. And we just want to make sure that if there's somebody out there that's really doing big things, if we're not talking about them, or make sure that their coach or their athletic director or somebody's getting them nominated, so we can definitely shout them out whenever we get a chance. So we're getting ready to go play a ball game, so I'm going to go get on the road and go watch mine play.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'll say this and then we'll head out. That definitely, please, nobody if you send somebody in once, twice, 3 times and you don't get, and the player might not get it, please don't get discouraged by that. Jared and I put a lot of work into this, Cabo and I on the baseball side, but we want to make sure that everybody understands that everybody gets the same attention. So yeah, definitely send those nominations in, and then we'll go through our first 2 players of the week next week once we have a little bit more time and things are kind of settled down. But that will do it for episode 62 of Arkansas Preps Weekly. Subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen or watch. Well, at least watch on YouTube or any of the audio platforms. We are there. So for Jared Hawthorn, all of us here at Natural State Sports on the Arkansas Preps Weekly podcast, I'm Kyle Sutherland. We will catch you next week.